Welcome to Arkansas Wildlife. Duck season has finally arrived here in the natural state, and we're going to celebrate the opening weekend of duck season with a segment about the history of duck hunting here in Arkansas. We're going to look at why duck hunters are so passionate about their sport and how Arkansas lays claim to be the duck hunting capital of the world. But first, we're going to examine one of the most important food sources for all sorts of wildlife here in the natural state. No matter whether you call it an acorn or an acorn, you'll see today why we call it a wildlife superfood. All that in this week's winner of an Arkansas hunting and fishing license right after this break. Arkansas Wildlife is brought to you in part by Academy Sports and Outdoors. For all, for less. Quick question. How do you pronounce this word? A-C-O-R-N.
It's acorn. That's an acorn.
Acorn.
That's acorn in Arkansas.
I'm from Illinois. That's an acorn.
How do you pronounce this word?
Acorn.
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 So you have to be from St. Louis north to call it an acorn.
It's an acorn in Arkansas, southeast Arkansas, Pine Bluff. I had a lot of them in my front yard.
No matter how you pronounce it, this little nut plays a big role in feeding many species of Arkansas wildlife. When the leaves turn each autumn, acorns fall like raindrops, feeding Arkansas critters large and small.
Acorns probably explain about 95% of the variance of the squirrel population. They're highly dependent on acorns. Their choices, they're the original forester, if you will. They go along and plant them and eat them. Their lives are highly correlated to the mast crop. So, very important asset for squirrels.
They're also important for white-tailed deer. Would you believe acorns can make up as much as 75% of a deer's diet in late fall and early winter?
They're very important, and they come at a crucial period of the year. You're leaving that summer stress period. You've got females out there that's been lactating, and lactation demands can lose 20 to 30% of their body weights due to lactation demands. So acorns hit at that time of year. They're high in fat, they're high in carbohydrates, so they restore the body condition for the female. For the males, for our bucks, it puts them in real good standing to go into the rut. So they're building up their fat reserves for a period of time where their eating is really going to diminish, and they're going to lose a lot of their body weight. So acorns fall at that period in the year where it's crucial for deer, for the doe to build herself up and for the buck to get ready for breeding.
Arkansas's bottomland hardwood forests provide a unique habitat where wintering ducks feast on a smorgasbord of acorns.
The acorns in there provide not a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of lipids, so really that high energy source throughout the winter months, and really makes sense given when those habitats flood, when acorns become available, when ducks arrive in them. It's also a time of year when ducks really need a lot of high energy foods. To complete courtship and pairing, they need a lot of energy. They need enough energy to support all the extra activity it takes to engage in courtship. It takes a lot of energy, particularly for a male, to put on courtship flights, participate in courtship flights, essentially to maintain that pair bond, which really boils down to running off other intruders that may want to come in and also try to challenge that bond. So they need the energy from those acorns to get those fat reserves up, to get the reserves to the point where they can actually conduct those events.
29 species of oaks are native to Arkansas. They're divided into two main groups, red oaks and white oaks. Many wildlife species prefer the taste of white oak acorns because they contain fewer tannins and aren't as bitter. Though not as palatable, red oak acorns are also an important part of the wildlife diet. Regardless of variety, acorns have been called the cheeseburger of the forest. They're easy to find and nicely packaged for consumption. Acorns are high in fat and protein and packed with calories. And as many hunters know, finding acorns often means finding wildlife.
There's a high correlation with the number of squirrels and the mass crop. And for a squirrel hunter, man, you definitely want to pay attention to it when they're looking for a high protein, high carbohydrate diets versus nuts with high fats, high proteins, the amount of acorns that make it, the types of acorns that make it, when they make. I mean, you can hunt the whole forest and see virtually nothing, and then go to one tree that's hot, man, and kill a limited squirrel. So they really rely on acorns quite a bit.
You go out to the woods, you go out duck hunting, and you just think a tree is a tree. Maybe we know the difference between cypress and some oaks, but within the oak trees, there's huge differences in the value to ducks. And mainly it boils down to the acorn being small enough that a duck can actually get it in its mouth. It's as simple as that.
White-tailed deer in the Ouachitas and Ozarks rely heavily on acorns.
Parts of our state are very mass dependent. When you look at the Ozarks and the Ouachitas, it's a closed canopy forest. And so when those acorns hit that time of year is very crucial because there's very limited browse on the forest floor. If we have a poor mass crop, you may see that for future years. It'll impact their body weight, which may impact, especially with our females, the number of fawns produced that following spring. We don't know that relationship, the clear relationship between acorns and fawning, but it could potentially impact fawning for that following spring.
Whether they fly through the treetops, jump through the limbs, or forage on the forest floor, many species of wildlife survive and thrive on the tiny acorn. But even our wildlife biologists disagree on one thing about this important wildlife food.
I've been chastised for pronouncing it acorn.
But it's not an acorn, it's acorn. Acorn.
I still pronounce it acorn, unless the crowd is particularly hostile. Then I will say acorn, just to try to fit in.
Here in Arkansas, duck hunting is more than its name implies. It's not simply about ducks or hunting. It's much more than that.
Duck hunting is an emotional thing for me. I mean, I have been emotional in a duck hunt. I've been ecstatic. I've been sad. I mean, it's just, I guess it's just a metaphor for life for me in a lot of ways.
I think it's just such a part of the culture. It's so culturally acceptable to be a duck hunter.
The threads of duck hunting are woven throughout the tapestry of Arkansas history. But what's the attraction to duck hunting all about? How can a duck make someone forsake sleep to slog through boot-sucking mud and stand for hours in near-freezing water? How can a mallard or pintail or green-winged teal inspire someone to suffer numb toes and fingers? Are duck hunters crazy?
We're just a bunch of old dudes just wanting to see a sunrise with some waterfowl involved in it. We all stop and just kind of catch our breath when we see that first movements of ducks right in front of us. You know, it's like, so I don't know. What is it to me? It's me. It's everything to me, and it's important.
Part of the attraction of duck hunting is surely its transient nature. Unlike many species of wildlife, ducks are just temporary Arkansas residents, passing through on their way to more southern latitudes or setting up residency here for just the coldest part of the winter. They travel thousands of miles from their places of birth in the northern U.S. and Canada, surviving against long odds. And when things work out just right, we're afforded the opportunity to marvel at the spectacle of the annual migration with our own eyes for a brief moment in time.
I can't imagine not having duck hunting in my life. And more than that, I can't imagine not having Arkansas duck hunting in my life.
Duck hunting has played a critical role in the lives of many Arkansans, and by extension, Arkansas history. Nowhere is that history better and more accurately summarized than in Arkansas Duck Hunter's Almanac, a book considered Arkansas duck hunting's ultimate resource by many of the state's waterfowlers. Veteran outdoor writers Steve Bowman and Steve Wright co-wrote the book, which was spawned largely by a desire to pass on the stories of an older generation of duck hunters.
There were a lot of 70 and 80-year-old hunters, and that, back in the 90s that were passing on, that they were taking a lot of historical events with them that most people didn't really realize were there. Duck hunters are innately tied to nostalgia, so that was just something that was really cool for us to sit down and start digging into. I wanted those stories told, and I wanted people to realize how important duck hunting has been to the history of Arkansas.
Modern Arkansas hunters take their duck hunting seriously, but their passion pales compared to the battle for hunting rights between commercial market hunters and recreational hunters at Northeast Arkansas's Big Lake in the early 20th century.
Basically, gun-toting, people shooting each other, battles in the duck woods at the turn of the 1900s for the opportunity to see who gets to shoot what ducks. They're each hiring their own set of gunfighters, and this is Arkansas historical fact. There were people who were killed and shot every day during a time when the ducks, because there really wasn't a whole lot about the seasons then, but when the ducks were here, and to see who was going to kill a duck and put it in a barrel to be shipped to a restaurant in Chicago or Memphis, as opposed to who was going to go out there and enjoy a morning that we've all come to love, seeing ducks fall through timber and shoot what we are going to eat.
Long before rice farming or the presence of artificially flooded forests known as green tree reservoirs, the ducks have come to Arkansas. The natural state includes nearly a third of the 24 million acres of the Mississippi Delta, a flood-prone area that has provided food and habitat for waterfowl since before human history.
The whole pattern of mallards migrating to these areas, truly at the bottom of a funnel. You think about geologically how all these rivers come together in East Arkansas. And even coming from the east. A lot of people don't think about that as much. They think about the Arkansas and the Mississippi and converging, and the White and the Black and the Cache and Landgill and all these sorts of rivers. But there's a lot of stuff coming in from the east too, out of Tennessee and the Ohio River Valley. All this stuff is converging right in the Delta of Arkansas, and hence the great history of duck hunting.
We've always had this natural flooding taking place before we ever started farming for rice, before we ever started building levees, putting up stock log structures, et cetera, et cetera. The water was here, ducks always came.
Although much of the state's historic bottomland hardwood forests were lost to the saw and the plow, Arkansas still retains some of the Mississippi Delta's largest tracts of these unique habitats. And in the 1930s, by happy accident, Arkansans figured out that artificially flooded forests also were duck magnets. When farmers started building levees around tracts of woods to hold water for irrigation, the ducks flocked to them in incredible numbers.
They'd see these bottoms would flood, the ducks would go in them, they'd have great hunting, and human nature leads you to want to replicate that more often than just that once every few years.
The combination of naturally flooded bottomlands and manipulated green tree reservoirs has made Arkansas a destination for duck hunters from across the country and around the world. Because there's nothing like the natural state's green timber duck hunting anywhere else.
You hear people talk about different sorts of timber hunting. I've heard people refer to timber hunting in all sorts of different woods that aren't really anything like the true timber hunting in Arkansas. It is something completely unique. It's not available on this scale really anywhere else in the world.
Come to Arkansas, you're going to get to see ducks falling through the timber, where most people don't ever get to see that, where they just pops and they respond so well, and they just drop at your feet, and it's just like it's like being in a duck hunter's heaven.
I think in one of our permit databases, we had 43 different states represented in one season coming to Arkansas to duck hunt. That's pretty phenomenal. I don't think many other states could boast that.
Today's duck hunters owe a debt of gratitude to conservationists of another era who had the foresight to protect land that many people considered useless. Shortly after the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission was established by Amendment 35 to the Arkansas Constitution in 1944, men such as Trustin Holder embarked on a campaign to buy lands that would become such hallowed duck hunting places as Biomeda WMA.
And we can spend a lot of time talking about, well, Arkansas has always been the place for ducks to go. It'll always be a place for ducks to go. Supposedly, it'll always be a place for ducks to go. What would have happened? We wouldn't have had Biomeda. What would have happened if we would have allowed the White River National Wildlife Refuge to not be there? What would have happened if Black River wasn't there? Incredible foresight. I mean, I can't imagine. It was almost like describing it in a way of, hey, I'm going to go over here and save this part of Arkansas because eventually that's where all the aliens are going to land. That's about how crazy it had to sound. But Trustin Holder was dedicated to that. And, if it hadn't have occurred, 1970s rolled around and $10 a bushel soybeans rolled around, and it was wholesale cut trees.
The conservation of Arkansas's natural wetlands reached another important crossroads in the early 1970s when the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers embarked on a plan to channelize the Cache River. But in one of the natural state's most important conservation success stories, a duck hunting dentist named Rex Hancock started a grassroots campaign to halt the destruction. He triumphed against long odds and preserved one of the most important waterfowl wintering areas in the world.
As far as conservation milestones go, you're talking about when you cut the heart of the melon out, you've got a shriveled up piece of rind. And Black Swamp, the Cache River itself, you cut that out, then we lose, as waterfowlers in Arkansas, the most important aspect of the whole season. Every duck hunter in the Mississippi Flyway benefits with the Cache River being there. Every duck hunter in Arkansas obviously benefits, but every person in Arkansas who doesn't duck hunt benefits from that, not only from an environmental standpoint, but from an economic standpoint. How much would we have lost? We'd be driving to Missouri to duck hunt. And that can't be understated. We would be driving somewhere else to recapture some of those nostalgic moments that tie us all together here in Arkansas.
Perhaps nostalgia is a good way to explain the historical significance of duck hunting in Arkansas.
It seems like it's a place where a whole lot of the old traditions are still here.
I'll have a 20-something-year-old in my blind. I'll tell him what it was like 20-something years ago before he was born. But I've been in that blind as a 20-something-year-old, and I've heard those stories from 30 and 40 and 50 and 100 years prior, and there's just a romance to it.
I think there's several newer, younger generations of duck hunters coming on the scene now. So there have been some changes, but I think at the heart of it all, it's still this old-time culture of long-time history of duck hunting.
Arkansas Wildlife presents the Watch and Win giveaway. During each episode of Arkansas Wildlife, we'll give away an Arkansas resident hunting and fishing license. At the end of this season, we'll be giving away $500 worth of hunting gear with everything you need for your next hunting adventure. It's all provided by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Visit the Arkansas Wildlife webpage and enter at arkansaswildlife.com. This week's winner is Debbie Covington from Cushman. Congratulations and thanks for watching.